What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the channel. Today I have a bit of a different video for you. I know I say that a lot, but today we're actually going to cover the ticket prices, merchandise prices, concession prices, and everything like that in Madden 20 owner mode, just to give you guys an idea of where I set my prices at and how I manage to make money in the owner mode. And this is going to vary depending on what team you are, depending on what type of thing you're trying to do in your owner mode, but you making money as an owner is going to depend heavily on successfully selling tickets, successfully selling your merchandise and your concessions, and so that is very important. So we're going to jump into those here in a second, but before I get into that, as usual, I want to show you guys the thing that I show everybody whenever they start off owner mode, because when you start off owner mode, it starts you off with $200 million, which you might think is a lot, but that might handicap a lot of people, so you might consider when you start a league to give everybody an equal playing field of a higher amount of money. And in order to do that, you can just go over here to user teams, and you can click on whichever player you want, and likely you would click on each of them, and you would just go down and click add $5 million in funds to them. And you can do that over and over and over again. I recommend doing that and raising everybody up to, probably like $300 million in funds, if not more, just so people have more things to play with. If you want it to be more of a challenge, then don't do that, but that is one way to raise your funds in Madden 20 owner mode. And then in addition to that, let's talk about our concession prices and everything. So in this franchise, I actually haven't touched them yet, and I'll go through the process of showing you how I'm going to do them and how I generally end up making money with it. It's not going to be super detailed, but it's just going to give you guys a general idea of where I set my prices at, and then you guys can fiddle with it from there. I'm sure there is an exact science to it out there somewhere if you do the research on it, but I don't know that much, and I've never had problems with it to the extent that I need to go out and do a bunch of research and figure out what the exact prices are, the optimal prices. And so let's go ahead and look at our finances. In order to get here, you're obviously going to go to My Owner, and then you're going to want to go to the Finances tab. And from here, you'll be able to access your ticket, merchandise, and concession prices, and that's all very straightforward. Now, when you get into the ticket prices, and it's going to be the same for your concessions and merchandise, you're going to see some feedback, and it's going to be telling you different things on the left, the right, and on the prices themselves. And so on the left, it's telling you a general idea of what your ticket prices look like, and this could fluctuate from week to week based off of feedback. And right now it says the ticket prices in the upper section have mostly been received well by our fans. So if you're not getting a negative message over there on the left side, that's a good sign. That at least means that you're not charging too much money for your tickets. However, that could be an indication that you're charging too little for your tickets. So you're going to want to go to the right side and evaluate what the feedback is for the mentions for the Dolphins over there. So it's going to give you some feedback, like the top one where it says Dolphins tickets in the mezzanine section are pretty average price wise, which is kind of where you actually want to be. You want to be on the edge of good prices to average prices. You don't want to be too cheap. You don't want your tickets to be too expensive, because then people won't buy it. Even if you're super successful, I've noticed that sometimes you'll struggle to sell tickets if you hike your ticket prices too high. So that can be a problem. I definitely recommend experimenting it with it yourself, but make sure you read all this feedback. So on the right side, it also says got a great deal on upper tickets at the last home game, so my upper level tickets might be a little bit too cheap. Dolphins tickets aren't cheap in the suite section, but they aren't expensive either. So we're kind of actually at a sweet spot here, based on the feedback that we're getting. Now, the last bit of feedback that you'll get is actually on the specific sections here as you look at them, and it's going to tell you how many you sold last week, and you're going to want to compare week to week. If you're having trouble with it, you're going to want to compare how many were actually sold for the previous week. So there's 4,300 suite tickets here available. If I'm only selling like 1,000 of those, then obviously my price is incorrect. I'm going to want to change that price. Now, but being that we're in preseason week 1 here, you're not going to see any feedback for how many tickets were sold in the previous week. And know that if you had an away game, you will also not see tickets sold for that, because obviously you're not selling tickets for away games. But make sure that you pay attention to that feedback. You want it to be a sweet spot where you're selling most of the tickets in each of those sections, and so you're going to have to fiddle with it a little bit. But these are generally pretty good prices in terms of where we're at here. I like $5.50 for the suite tickets. I might even go a little bit lower for my club tickets. I would maybe even consider going into the range of like $150, but right now it's telling me that's a good value. So these are pretty good price points for you guys to kind of average out at. Now, one of the rules of thumbs that I kind of like to stick to is I want there to be an even spacing between the pricing of these tickets. So between the suite level and club tickets, you're looking at, I don't look at the first digit in the column. I don't look at the 500 or the 100. I look at the 50 versus the 80. So you're looking at a somewhat equal distance between that 50 and the 80, and then the 80 and the 20, and then the 20 and the 45. Now that might not make a whole lot of sense, but generally speaking, you want to have a nice flow between your ticket levels. You want it to be a logical progression in price point. So you don't want your mezzanine tickets to be $10 more expensive than your upper level tickets, because that just doesn't make sense. The mezzanine tickets should probably be twice as much as your upper level tickets. And likewise for the club tickets, those ones are slightly better than your mezzanine tickets, so you're going to want them to be a little bit less than twice as much as your mezzanine tickets. And then your suite tickets are obviously going to be the most expensive. They're going to be double, if not a little bit more than double, your club level tickets. So this is a pretty good price point if you're struggling to make money. I actually don't see any issues with these at the moment. I would need to check it out week to week, but start by setting your ticket prices at something relatively like this, where they all say good value, and you shouldn't have too many problems from there moving forward. Now let's go ahead and look at our merchandise prices. Our merchandise prices, there are some interesting things that you can do here to help yourself out. Now, what I like to do, and the game doesn't necessarily think of it this way, you're also going to want to keep in mind the feedback on the left and the feedback on the right. But what I like to do is I kind of like to think of all of these things comparatively. So a great example of this is if you look at the Nike game home jersey. I'm thinking of this as a basic jersey, doesn't really have a name on it or anything like that. It's saying that the price point right now is $100. Well, then I go and look at my other jerseys and I say, okay, well, these are all listed at $110. I don't think that that's comparable. I don't think that a Nike game home jersey that doesn't have a name on it should be even close to the price of a star player's jersey. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my jersey amounts first. I'm okay with the $110 price point for my best players. So players like Russell Wilson, $110. Larry Fitzgerald, that's fine, $110. But once I start to get into some of my older players, some players that aren't necessarily superstars on my team, I'm going to take their jersey amount and reduce them. So I'm going to put them at slightly less. If you have somebody on this list that you know really isn't worth a whole lot, like I think this is a TJ Green jersey, I would put him at like $90. Make sure that he is less, because you're less likely to sell those jerseys to begin with, so you want to make the price more enticing for people buying those jerseys. And then you want to go back over to your team apparel and consider the comparative value there. So a Nike game home jersey that doesn't have a name on it should be at most $90 to compare to one that does have a name on it. Then you're going to want to consider the value of your other items. I like to consider the value of what I would be willing at a stadium to go and pay for some of these things. $32 for a t-shirt doesn't make a lot of sense. I would reduce the value of that. Hats tend to run in the $30 to $35 range. I would put that somewhere at $30 to $35. A sweatshirt kind of makes sense at the $50 price point. I would lower that slightly. A jacket, you're generally speaking not going to see a whole lot of people buying this regardless, because of how high the price point is no matter what. And the trade-off is they could get a jersey instead, which a lot of people would rather do. So I'm going to leave the price point for the jacket. And then in terms of a New Era knit hat, this is a pretty basic hat, basically just a beanie. I think $20 is a pretty fair price point to charge for a team beanie. And then we're going to go ahead and look at the memorabilia. You can change these things how you see fit. Generally speaking, I try to put these ones as good value as well. I'll take it down to 250 or 275 for the football, depending on how much I'm selling. I'll start at 275, and if I don't feel like I'm selling enough, I'll take it down to 250. And then for the Reid mini helmet, I am always taking that down to $20, just because I feel like I sell a lot more when I take it down from $25 to $20. So those are my price points for the merchandise. And then when we get to concessions, I actually have a interesting rule of thumb for you guys to follow. So the Dolphins actually are a really nice example to use for this, because we have basic 2-star, 3-star, and 4-star categories all at our fingertips. And so I can give you guys a great example of what I do for here. I try to keep the prices consistent across the board for these things. So what I'm going to try to do actually is I'm going to try to make these all the same price point. So I try to average it out. So I say $2 is the lowest value for some of these things. Some of these are being charged for $5. I would say somewhere in the middle would be roughly $3. So I'm going to charge $3 for everything in my first category. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to go to my next category, and I'm going to say, okay, well, I charge $3 for everything in that category. This stuff is averaging out at maybe about $5. So I'm going to charge $5 for everything in this category. And so you'll end up with some things that are slightly overpriced, some things that are slightly underpriced, but generally speaking, you're going to get a good comparison of what is selling against the other items, and you'll get a good price jump between level 1 stuff versus level 2 stuff. Then we're going to go to level 3, do the same thing for these items, look at them and say, okay, you know, I'm going to charge roughly $6 for all of these items, a slight step up from the last one, and then these are all basically gourmet items for us, so we're going to actually charge $7 or $8 for items like this. And so this is generally what I do with my price points. I try and keep them similar across the board. Certain things will end up being cheaper, certain things will end up selling more than others, and so you will want to come back to it and see and adjust accordingly. But I like the idea of setting everything at the same price point and then seeing how that affects whether people buy it or not, because then that gives you a good judge of, you know, how you can change these things up against each other. You know, are they buying one thing because it is cheaper than its average price, or are they buying something that is more expensive than its average price? So you're going to want to pay attention to those things from week to week, but this is generally where I will set my price points to start off with, and a lot of times I'll just leave them here and I'll make money regardless, because I have these set at a pretty consistent price points. Everything that's cheap is $3, everything that's a next step up is $5, next step up from that $6 or $7, and then the next step up from that $7 or $8. So it's pretty consistent across the board. Nice and easy like that, a good easy way to start out, and that will help you guys compare it if you're newer to these things and, you know, don't really know how to compare it as easily. So that's pretty much what there is to it. That's how I set my ticket merchandise and concession prices. I'm not claiming that I know the exact science to it or anything like that. I haven't done enough research for that to be the case. I just know that through playing owner mode a whole bunch of times this year, I've never been negative. I've never lost money. I always make money. And so by using the price points that I showed you guys, you should be able to get yourself to a point where you're making money fairly consistently, as long as you're not putting yourself in a hole by signing bad contracts or, you know, buying a more expensive stadium than you can afford or something like that. You shouldn't have any problems. So if this video does help you guys out in some way, make sure you leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and comment down below what you guys need help with, what you guys want to see next, and I'll add it to the list and get back to you guys as soon as possible. I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.